Coffee with Joe for October 22nd, 2009, my weekly web chat with Joe Bongiovanni down in Harborton, Virginia. How you doing, Joe?
Great, thanks, Pete.
There was an amazing show on Frontline on Tuesday night about Brooksley Born and her effort to regulate derivatives from way back in the 1990s. But another thing is former Fed Chairman Paul Vocker came out yesterday in the New York Times and said we need to reinstate the Glass-Steagall Act. I don't understand the Glass-Steagall very well, but it separates the banking and investment functions to help protect people's savings. I'm quoting from the Times article here. Mr. Volcker's proposal would roll back the nation's commercial banks to an earlier era when they were restricted to commercial banking and prohibited from engaging in risky Wall Street activities.
What he's really saying is you can't get there from here. He's saying you can't get to economic recovery without paving the road with the required protections and restrictions that we've done away with. And, to me, it's a great thing that he's done to raise it again. Of course, what do we have? We have Geithner saying, oh, no, we can't do this. Bernanke saying, oh, no, we can't do this. Larry Sommers saying, oh, no, we can't do this. These are the people that, that we're all supposed to bow down to.
Joe,
yeah.
I'll just cut in here. They're the very same people that were opposing Brooksley Born regulating derivatives in the 90s.
For those of us who think that, we want to try to effect an honest, open political discussion and solution to the money system and the money problems of the money system, and you face the reality of somebody like Brooksley Born, somebody that of incredible intellectual capacity to really have a handle on what derivatives were all about, Pete, and to recognize that, the concept of creating financial instruments that the kind of the trademark of them is the black box, Pete, where there's a formula inside this black box. Nobody really knows what it is, but you put risk in on this side and you got less risk coming out on the other side. That's somebody to understand that represents a threat to the money system of the United States. When she was before Congress, it was really such an excellent program on Frontline. It's so long overdue, and I can't say enough about how great it was. But when she was before Congress, and they said, and those I forget whether it was Phil Graham said, well, just exactly what is your objective here, ma'am?
Yeah.
And she said, well, my objective is to protect the people's money, the taxpayers' money. You've got the people like Brooksley Born becoming marginalized. Yeah, she was head of the CFTC, but they disempowered her. They took away the only authority legally that she had to try to protect the taxpayers. This goes back, Pete, to Volcker's point about having the mixture of the investment banking and the commercial banking where they're actually using the seed money of the depositors of the commercial banking system. That's the seed money that goes to build up corporations and bank corporations and investment banking securities and on and on and on. How wrong that is, and that's why the timing of Volcker coming out and making the statement. I think I said it before about the stars being aligned, Pete. For something really serious to happen here. More and more people becoming more and more informed.
They talked about if we did reinstitute Glass-Steagall, we did what Volcker's talking about. The Times article talks about going back to an earlier time in banking in the 1930s.
The thing about Glass-Steagall and the limitations that it put on, sure, they were great for what they did, Pete. They limited by regulation, okay, by legislation and then, a bunch of regulation, the risk to the depositors in the banking system, okay? Instead of preventing the risk, okay? It limited it and regulated it instead of preventing it. And the vehicle for going to preventing it, which is full reserve banking, okay, and there were the recommendations at that time in the Chicago Plan for monetary reform, and again put out by the most noted economists of the day, really, were the ones that FDR, would not accept. So now there's FDR. He had an incredible mandate from the people. He had incredible vision, but he was not, I want to say, willing and able to take on the bankers. Okay, the bankers were the one trust that he could not take on, and so that was, that was to me his failure. And what we're advocating is that we go back to reconsider that point in time when we had the opportunity to put in place prevention mechanisms. Pete, the bankers really don't care if we go back to Glass-Steagall. Okay, why? Well, they'll have to pull in their horns, a little bit, but it's going to be a matter of regulation. And with regulation, there always comes deregulation. The regulate-deregulate cycle is the same to the bankers as the business cycle. It's a little different cycle. It's a kind of a cycle that only happens, once every big cycle, but it doesn't matter. At some point, you get people in there and they say, we're being prevented from prosperity by these regulations. We need to get them out of the way. Or some other country convinces their government to do it, and then in order for our bankers to have parity with some other country's bankers, well, we can't be left behind. We can't let them have all that prosperity. So the only way to do it is through legislation, Pete, is through legislation, solid legislation. Dennis Kucinich, the American Monetary Institute's plans, Pete, that's the only real vehicle for soundly moving the economy forward, for accomplishing the goals that I know that Paul Vocker has, that is to say, he knows that we can't recover from here, but it does not go far enough, Pete. That's your real point, is even going back to Glass-Steagall, which even Obama, who has the same people standing behind him as did any of those guys going down the road. Obama did not get into office without Wall Street money, and that Wall Street money is getting its return on its investment right now. And we need to change that. Obama's people, Pete, this is why I look at it. Obama's people were sitting there watching that Frontline program, and they see this president who promised us change standing there with the same guys behind him that caused the problem. That, to me, is the story. Obama, you got to do better than that. Obama needs to turn himself around at that point and say to those guys, you're out of here, and start putting in Brooksley Born, Vocker in a higher position, Stiglitz, because, he's one of the guys who recognizes and supports it, and others, It's not just the people. It's the legislation, Pete. We need the legislation. We need people that recognize that the money system has, an inherent flaw, creating all the money as debt, and get over that and into debt-free money.
Joe, if we are actually successful in reforming the monetary system according to Kucinich's act, wouldn't there still be a need for regulation?
Oh yeah, there would be a need for regulation, but because you can't write everything in legislation, but it would be much smaller. It should be a part of the process, Pete. This is just my personal belief, because I don't like regulation either. Is how to minimize regulation. How do we minimize regulation? Regulation, you have to put in there. You have to put in regulation because people don't understand what the legislation allows. What does it allow them to do? I read this. What does it allow them to do? Have really good purpose for the legislation, really clear, and legislation that accomplishes the purpose. The regulations could be minimized. Should be minimized.
Joe, thanks for sharing your thoughts today with our listeners.
Okay, Pete. Thanks.
See you, Joe.
Ciao.